So that does lead us into the art historical side. Dr. Evelyn Cohen is an art historian who specializes in illuminated Hebrew manuscripts, former Samuel H. Kress Fellow and Coleman Fellow at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She has served on the faculty of Columbia University, Brooklyn College, the University of Pennsylvania, and the Jewish Theological Seminary, where she was the first curator of Jewish art. A widely published author, she has received the National Jewish Book Award and the Henry Allen Moe Prize for her writings. She is, with Emil Shriver and Sharon Mintz, the co-editor of the Brzezinski catalog. And she will speak to us today on making Hebrew manuscripts in a Gentile world. Dr. Cohen.
The exhibition of highlights from the Brzezinski collection provides an unparalleled opportunity to see Hebrew books, marriage contracts, and scrolls. It demonstrates that motifs from various, even Christian sources were adopted and adapted for use in Hebrew manuscripts throughout the centuries. The illuminated border on this title page was appropriated from a design found in one of the 15th century handwritten books in the superb Brzezinski collection. Before discussing some of the decorated works in the exhibition, I would like to turn briefly to an important non-decorated piece, a letter that one of Italy's foremost Judaic scholars in the 15th century, Joseph Colon Trabotto, born in the Duchy of Savoy, wrote to his disciple, David of Modena, a rabbi in Bologna. Colon wanted to confirm that assistance had been obtained in Rome for the maintenance of 2 synagogues. He was also concerned that his previous letter had not been received, as he had entrusted it to someone who, he later was told, was untrustworthy. In 15th century Italy, like today, when a letter is submitted for delivery, there is no guarantee it will arrive at its intended destination. The original letter, the small scrap at the bottom, is pasted onto a larger piece of paper. Menachem Schmelzer has pointed out in his erudite catalog entry on this work that the letter's content was transcribed at the top in the 16th century Italian script, as the later generation of Italian Jews could no longer read the Ashkenazic script. Currently on view at the Met, as part of the ongoing exhibition program that was mentioned before between the Jewish Theological Seminary and the Metropolitan Museum, is a copy of Maimonides' Code of Jewish Religious Law, known as the Mishneh Torah. This volume was copied in Ashkenaz, either southern Germany or northern France, around 1300. The page you are viewing depicts the temple menorah, the 7-branch candelabra, as described by Maimonides. Although the image is quite clear and detailed, the curators found that the display case in which it was housed, although frequently cleaned, was continuously covered with nose prints. Penned in Ashkenazic script, which you saw was a challenge to Italian Jews of the 16th century, 21st century viewers are struggling to read this form of writing as well, and are getting as close as possible to the vitrine. As a result, the museum has discovered a new yardstick by which to gauge the public's interest. Unusually numerous display case nose prints. Currently, this volume is a hands-down winner. So I want to encourage you to go to the Medieval Gallery and see it, but please keep your nose off the case. The Brzezinski collection includes several decorated manuscripts from Renaissance Italy. This Italian Rite prayer book was written around the last quarter of the 15th century. The small work easily fits into the palm of one's hand, so to really experience this, you have to go down to the museum. At the right, seen at the bottom of the opening page, is an unidentified family crest. Jews in Renaissance Italy, in emulation of their Christian neighbors, included family devices in the works of art they commissioned. In the upper section of the page, the initial word Elu is framed with delicate penwork. As initial letters are not used in Hebrew, the entire first word, rather than the initial letter, was chosen for decoration. Beneath the circle embellishing the word is a hare hunt. A stork is at the left, while an angelic head with wings is placed at each upper corner. These motifs are employed merely as ornament and do not relate to the text, which begins, "These are the 100 blessings one is required to say each day." At the left is another initial word, ata, you, a reference to God. Within a circular form above and below the word are angelic heads with wings, while on either side a putto appears to support the round form. Unrelated to the text, this imagery is commonly found in 15th century art in Italy. As adornment for their books, motifs that were popularly depicted in works of art of the period were utilized for Jews as well. There is no inscription indicating the name of the scribe in this work. His identity is revealed, however, by means of the little decorations that sprout from the word ume aryeh, which appears at the right, and I hope you can see it at the top right corner of the page. So you have these little dots coming out. The word means, and from the lion. That's one word in Hebrew, and from the lion. But by adorning the last 4 letters, the scribe, Aryeh ben Eliezer Chalfan, indicated Aryeh was his name as well. The scribal practice of embellishing words that are part of the copyist's name appears in many Hebrew manuscripts. At the bottom of this page is an exceptional unfinished drawing of a reclining man. Note the delicacy in the rendering of his hair and beard in this tiny image. In its entirety, the page measures only 4 1/3 by 3 inches. So he's less than an inch tall. But look at the wonderful detail. Unrelated to the text, chained monkeys are found on 2 of the prayer book's pages. The one placed to the left of the initial word panel holds an unidentifiable object against his chest, while the monkey at the bottom of the page on the left touches the porcupine it's confronting. Monkeys often appear in Christian medieval manuscripts as well. Although frequently their presence is playful, at times they're employed symbolically, as seen here. A miniature from the late 15th century, where a monkey is identified at the top left as one of the 7 deadly sins, in this case, luxuria, or extravagance. Monkeys often appear as drolleries in the margins of manuscripts. At times, they literally ape humans. As seen here, where a monkey takes the place of the author of Psalms. Wearing an oversized crown and sitting cross-legged, playing a harp, the monkey appears in the guise of King David. At the right, a tantrid monkey priest blesses 2 primates. Other times, monkeys engage in what is best described as monkey business, as in the bottom margin at the left. One monkey stands reverentially before a Simeon monk, and 2 more respectfully sit holding books, while in the middle, 2 monkeys play around. These are among the tamer images I have found. Many were too vulgar to be shown in this venue, though keep in mind the scenes are adorning religious texts. In Hebrew manuscripts, primates ape humans as well. As seen on this page from another JTS library manuscript known as the Passover Haggadah, created in Spain at the beginning of the 14th century. This book was on display at the Met last year in the exhibit Pen and Parchment Drawing in the Middle Ages. In the margin at the left, an ape is shown holding a golden globe. At times, monkeys are depicted in a humorous manner, as in this prayer book from southern Germany, dated 1459 to 60. Embellishing the prayer for rain recited during Shmini Atzeret, a monkey, inexplicably shown eating from a bowl, while the banner above his head is inscribed with the words of the prayer from the main text. This creates an illusion that he's gorging himself while in prayer. The Haggadah, the book that is read during the Seder, the ceremonial meal at the beginning of Passover, frequently contains depictions of the food that is eaten during the repast. Both the matzah and the bitter herbs often are shown being held in the hand of the person leading the Seder. In the Washington Haggadah in the Library of Congress, the matzah is shown being raised by a monkey. This manuscript, penned by the noted scribe artist Yoel ben Shimon, contains other humorous depictions, such as a man holding the bitter herbs while pointing to his wife to indicate that she is the cause of his bitterness. Obviously, not everyone finds this amusing, but it was popular in medieval Hebrew manuscripts. The matzah-holding monkey, however, is unique, and its meaning remains obscure. Originating from Bonn or Cologne, Yoel was later active in northern Italy as well. Several manuscripts were copied by him, while many others are attributed to him and his circle. Among the manuscripts in the Brzezinski collection is a book of minhagim, religious customs, perhaps from northern Italy, which contains several drawings executed in red ink that reflect the style of Yoel ben Shimon. The young man with the bobbed haircut, seen in profile at the top left of the initial word panel, is a type frequently found in works attributed to Yoel. The hares depicted at the top, rabbits, are found in many of his works and appear in 4 of the 7 decorated pages of this manuscript. Note the owl in the bottom border. In contrast to what you'll be seeing later, in this case, the nocturnal creature seems to have no relation to the text. This is the opening page of the book, which also often is the most damaged. So even though we could have fixed it up in Photoshop, it's good for you to see what the first page of a manuscript looks like. Now you'll see it changes a bit. Here. On another page, in place of a flower, a head shown in profile emerges from the tip of a leafy stem. Unrelated to the text, the heavy eyelid and bumpy nose are characteristic of the features found on faces in the margins of Yoel's manuscripts. This page, however, which contains instructions for Hoshana Rabbah, the 7th day of the festival of Sukkot, includes a scene that relates to the text. Typical of Yoel's art are the dragon beneath the initial word and the clothing of the man below. The figure's actions accord with the religious practices observed during this festival. Standing before an open prayer book, a man holds the 4 species, the depiction of which is hugely oversized. A few folios later, below a text that deals with Hanukkah, another text illustration appears. A man is shown lighting candles for the Festival of Lights, which is celebrated for 8 days in the winter. Portrayals of this type, even when minimal, convey important documentation of Jewish life in the Middle Ages. In this case, the depiction of the Hanukkah menorah is of interest, as no candelabrum of this type survives. There is no such thing as Jewish style in art. Jewish manuscript illuminations reflect the local style of decoration. This miscellany for life cycle events from the last third of the 15th century was copied by Yehuda bar Yehoshua de Rossi of Cesena, who also copied a 2-volume prayer book that is divided between 2 collections in Jerusalem. That manuscript was decorated in the manner of Yoel ben Shimon, while the style of the illumination in this work is that of the school of Ferrara. And probably you've realized that this is the border that was adapted so beautifully by Evgenia Dyzenko for the title page of this talk. It has been speculated that the artist of this manuscript was Christian. In Renaissance Italy, Christian artists, even well-known miniaturists, frequently were commissioned to decorate Hebrew books. In the scene at the right, the bridegroom is about to place a ring on the bride's finger. Among the text in this manuscript is a formula for a marriage contract. This type of contract, known in Hebrew as a ketubah, protects the bride by outlining the responsibilities of the groom toward her. One of the great strengths of the Brzezinski collection is the range of its beautifully decorated marriage contracts. While the text in this ketubah from Amsterdam, dated 1662, was written by hand, the first 3 words and the borders were printed. This particular type of border was frequently used by Sephardim, Jews of Spanish and Portuguese origin, in the Netherlands. Considering the popularity of tulips in Holland, it is not surprising to find them appearing among the flowers in the borders. Although painted after the tulip mania peaked in 1636, the flower remained a favorite motif in art of the region. This can be seen in numerous examples at the Met, as in this watercolor on vellum, which is part of a tulip album painted by Jacob Marel around 1635. Depicted are 4 different types of tulips, with their names inscribed beneath each example. Other elements in the ketubah are derived from commonly portrayed subjects of the period. At the top right of the contract, a couple dressed in 17th century Dutch attire hold hands, probably symbolizing their marriage. At the top left is an image of Charity, personified as a semi-nude woman who attends to 2 small children. The characterization of caritas, the theological virtue of love, can be found in the Met's collection as well. Here seen in a mid-16th century Franco-Flemish alabaster figure depicting Charity, who in this case balances not 2, but 3 small children. So we don't need 3 people. 1 person balances all 3 in this case. Italian ketubot often were decorated with images taken from Italian non-Jewish art. Within a cartouche at the bottom of this Roman marriage contract from 1763 is a popular allusion to love. Cupid, winged and nude, is shown reclining next to his bow and quiver. The imagery at the top refers more overtly to the union of the bridal couple. The crests of the 2 families are placed side by side. In keeping with Jewish tradition, the bridegroom's is at the right, while the bride's is at the left. And in Italy in general, you would find the reverse. The practice of uniting coats of arms of wedded families was common in Italian art. One well-known example is in the Met's collection. On the underside of this childbirth tray, painted to commemorate the birth of Lorenzo de' Medici in 1449, are the crests of the Medici and Tornabuoni families. It's a bit difficult to see now as the silver decoration has oxidized, but dominating the center is the emblem of Piero de' Medici, Lorenzo's father, who commissioned the work. And it's a big diamond ring, even though it's hard to see that, with 3 feathers. At the top left are the 8 red balls of the Medici, and at the right, the rampant lion of the Tornabuoni. Not fully united, as they sometimes are in ketubot, in this marriage contract from Rome, the 2 family devices are tied together by a ribbon. The notion of marital union is reinforced by depicting a couple united by a chain around their necks, from which a single heart dangles. Shalom Sabar, who wrote the scholarly and meticulously detailed entries for the ketubot in the Brzezinski catalog, has authored pioneering works that analyze the use of contemporary subjects for the decoration of Italian marriage contracts. He has demonstrated the borrowing of imagery from Cesare Ripa's Iconologia, a book of emblems which was first published with illustrations in Rome in 1603. Ripa's visual metaphor for marital harmony depicts a husband and wife bound together with a chain from which, as in the ketubah, a single heart is suspended. The delicately adorned contract from Massa di Carrara, dated 1765, also displays the use of motifs commonly found in Italian art. The female figure seated on clouds toward the top is a personification of Fame, who announces the couple's good name. frequently portrayed in Italian art, though not always as modestly attired, is the personification of Fame blowing her trumpet, and this appears upstairs in the ceiling decoration of the Triumph of the Barbaro family, a painting on canvas by Giovanni Battista Tiepolo of around 1750. So the dates are very close here even. Popular motifs from the general culture were commonly used for the adornment of ketubot. In this marriage contract from Lugo, dated 1841, the loving couples in the border not only reflect the borrowing of images from contemporary art, but the actual recycling of these subjects. The amorous paired figures have been removed from another engraved source and pasted onto this beautifully cut out lace-like parchment border. Not only are the scenes reclaimed, the entire border itself is reused. As Sabar pointed out, the border was created in the 18th century for an earlier ketubah and appropriated here, a practice seen in other Jewish marriage contracts as well. The giving of the ketubah, a practice still in use today, serves to guarantee the rights of the Jewish bride. One of the most famous of all Jewish brides, however, never obtained a ketubah, although she did receive a crown and was offered up to half of her husband's kingdom. Still, she never was granted the security that a marriage contract would have guaranteed, and despite her husband's offer, we know that things did not turn out well for her predecessor. I am referring, of course, to the biblical Queen Esther, seen here in a panel from a cassone, a marriage chest, from the Metz collection that was on view in the recent exhibition, Art and Love in Renaissance Italy. It's also on view still upstairs. The scene of King Ahasuerus approaching Esther for their marriage is replete with spectacular pageantry. Note the king on horseback in the center of the procession that's at the left. Now I'll show a detail from the right. The women are seated under a loggia at the right, while the marriage takes place at the left. It was noted in the exhibition catalog that in the Renaissance, the story of Esther was depicted in a contemporary manner, as seen from the Florentine architectural setting and the elaborate 15th century attire. This approach is found in Jewish art as well. The Berginsky collection contains many scrolls of the text of the Book of Esther that were used for the public reading on the eve and the morning of the festival of Purim. Jewish law mandates that a Megillah, a scroll, be used. Here is an example of a Megillah from India, created around 1900. The scene at the opening, which is on the right, depicts a contemporary reading of the scroll in the synagogue. The large turbaned figure in the center reads aloud from a Megillah while flanked by male congregants, most of whom wear fezzes. The female congregants are seated in the women's section at the top. All of the other scenes in this brightly illustrated scroll depict events from the biblical book, but always in a contemporary mode. To the left of the first column of text is the initial illustration. King Ahasuerus, whose reign spread from India to Ethiopia, is dressed in military attire, complete with epaulets and a medal. He and his 7 eunuchs sit on sofas of the period, and he's at the top. He's the central figure there in the blue and the red uniform. The scroll probably was created for the Sassoon family, in whose collection it belonged previously. The internationally known family, an Iraqi in origin, by this time had moved to India and branched out as far as China to the east and England to the west. The Megillah contains a mixture of Indian and English motifs. Seen at the top center is Mordechai, flanked by Haggai, guardian of the women, seated at the right, and Esther standing at his left. Although dressed in Western attire, Esther has a bindi on her forehead, as do the maidens below, whose ornate jewelry lends an Indian flavor to the scene. So you have a real mix here. In this panel, Esther without a forehead decoration and Ahasuerus without his crown are seated above a scene of destruction. In contrast to the portrayal found in European scrolls, where in a tradition dating back to the Middle Ages, the victorious Jews stand on the people they've killed, here hands and heads are cut off, reflecting a non-Western form of execution. A work that is quite different in appearance is this diminutive scroll from 18th century Alsace. Devoid of scenes from the story of Esther, it is nonetheless engaging in its colorful depictions of the regional attire of the period, as seen here in the low-cut laced corselet of the woman and the rough and floppy hat of the man. The unusual imbibing owls add a lively element to this light-hearted scroll. Unlike the owl seen earlier in the 15th century Book of Religious Customs, these birds have a symbolic meaning. At times, these solitary nocturnal birds of prey were associated with death and misfortune, and thought of with fear and dread. This is reflected with ironic humor in a Hungarian shield from around 1500. And again, that's upstairs here. An owl perched on a branch stares out at the viewer. Its thoughts are inscribed in the banner that surrounds it. The German text proudly declares, "Though I am hated by all the birds, nevertheless, I rather enjoy that." The targe is on display again at the end of the medieval gallery. In Greek art, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, was at times depicted with an owl. Because of this association, in the West, owls often symbolize wisdom. Sometimes, however, they carry the opposite connotation. On the screen are two renderings of an old crone known as Malababa, the Witch of Harlem. The painting on the right is an original by Frans Hals. On the left is a later copy from the Met's collection. This demonic, cackling woman, known for drinking heavily, has an owl perched on her shoulder. This portrayal reflects expressions such as stupid as an owl and drunk as an owl that were popular in Germanic languages. The appearance of these drinking owls is, therefore, quite apt within the context of Purim festivities, in which people drink until they are unable to distinguish between Haman, the villain in the story, and Mordechai, the righteous man who, along with Esther, saved the Jews. This scroll, currently on view at the Yeshiva University Museum, was not included in the exhibition when it opened in October in Amsterdam, because it had not yet been acquired by the Brzezinskis. Scholars were aware of its existence, however, and its importance was noted by Elke Deitch and Sharon Lieberman-Mintz in their essay in the exhibition catalog. It is the earliest known complete decorated Esther scroll, and the only one believed to have been penned by a woman in the pre-modern period. On view are the opening benedictions at the beginning of the biblical text, and the last part of the text, which includes within a circle the scribe's colophon. She identifies herself as Estelina, the wife of Menachem, and states that she copied the text in Venice in 1564. As women are required to hear the reading of the book of Esther, some rabbis allowed the scrolls to be written by them as well. By the late 13th century in Italy, women such as Paula Nav served as scribes. Also, several manuscripts were produced for women. This illuminated 15th century prayer book, whose decoration has been attributed to the renowned Florentine illuminator Mariano del Buono, belongs to the Library of the Jewish Theological Seminary. It was on view at the Met 3 years ago, where it was displayed opposite a leaf from the museum's collection that had been attributed to the same artist. The exhibition showed the public that Christian artists were employed by Jews to decorate their Hebrew books. The Brzezinski collection contains an exceptional work, a Haggadah, which was neither copied by a woman nor commissioned for a woman. It's the only known example of a Hebrew manuscript to have been illuminated by a woman. On the title page, the Hebrew text, written in letters embellished with gold, states, "The order of the Passover Haggadah with drawings, meaning images, of the miracles of God performed for our ancestors when they were led out of Egypt. I drew them with my weak hand. Charlotte, daughter of the late Rabbi Nathan Rothschild, may the memory of the righteous be a blessing. The manuscript was made for her uncle, Amschel Rothschild, her late father's brother. And actually, there's a date. It's actually a Hebrew inscription at the very bottom. It looks as though it's carved into the wood. The year is 1842. Much is known about Charlotte Rothschild, who is seen here in a self-portrait, seated at an easel, painting a portrait of her husband, Anselm Solomon von Rothschild, with the two of their 7 children. Charlotte was a member of the prominent Rothschild banking family that had branches in several European countries. Born into a privileged existence in England, Charlotte, lovingly referred to by her family as Chilly, was an extraordinarily intelligent and talented woman. The decorative title page may well have been written as well as painted by Charlotte. The style of the Hebrew lettering is different from that found throughout the manuscript, which was penned by Eliezer Sussman Mezerich, so a well-known scribe. There is no doubt that Charlotte knew Hebrew. In 1832, she wrote to her sister Louisa, asking her to give her best love to Papa, and, quote, to be so good as to tell him I would write him a Hebrew letter, but as he considers himself an Englishman, I think an English letter would give him more pleasure. Many members of the Rothschild family, including Charlotte and her husband, employed Moritz Daniel Oppenheim, often referred to today as the first Jewish painter. In his memoir, Oppenheim recorded that he designed subjects for the Haggadah, which Charlotte executed in accordance with the style of old missals that she procured from Paris, from the Paris Library, which is undoubtedly the Bibliothèque Nationale, the National Library. Currently, the only drawings known to have been supplied by Oppenheim for this project were for Haggadah, sung at the end of the Seder. On the screen are the fully illuminated pages. Shalom Sabar has noticed that images in this Haggadah sometimes recall Renaissance art, pointing out in particular that the scene of Moses on Sinai seems to have been inspired by Raphael's Transfiguration. The mixture of styles in this manuscript is quite striking, and it seems that Charlotte relied on many different sources. The delicate design in the border around the page contrasts strongly with the style of the Seder scene at the bottom. Within this one image, various influences may be seen. Although set in a contemporary interior, the clothing and chairs seem to be from an earlier period. And the scene is, to a certain degree, a romantic evocation of a Seder. And that's romantic with a capital R, referring to the Romantic movement in art of this time. Charlotte signed her initials on the back of the chair at the right. Sabar has pointed out the similarities between this scene and Oppenheim's well-known rendering of a Seder. He also noted that Charlotte's work predates Oppenheim's and wondered whether she influenced him rather than the reverse. As this is the only page in the Haggadah in which she chose to assert her authorship, I think we have to consider seriously her role as creator of this work. Although much has been made of her having taken classes with Oppenheim, scholars have overlooked that Oppenheim himself recounted that when he initially tried to discourage her from becoming his pupil, she pointed out that she had already studied with Baron Gerard, that is, Francois Gerard, first painter to the King of France. Maybe he was scared. Oppenheim wrote that Charlotte executed the manuscript in the style of old illuminated missals that she had borrowed from the library in Paris. These prayer books may well have inspired the border design around the page with the Seder scene. The current image has a strikingly Christian feel as well. Dominating the center of the composition is a frame painting of Moses holding the tablets of the law. The panel is revealed by 2 angels who hold open the drapes that hang before it. In their other hands, they hold long tapers. The angels stand on what seems to be a table covered with a white cloth on which has been placed a Seder plate containing the ceremonial Passover foods. The front of the table is a carved pink relief depicting the Israelites' hasty preparations for their departure from Egypt. Similar in format to the title page, there is a non-Jewish aura about these illustrations, and you can see both pages are closely related. Oppenheim's comment that Charlotte used the style of Christian prayer books in preparing this manuscript is significant. I propose that at least one of the works was the Book of Hours of Frederick III of Aragon, produced between 1501 and 1504 and acquired by the National Library of Paris in 1828. It is believed the borders of the work were painted in the late 15th century in Italy, while the illustrations themselves were added by the French artist Jean Bourdichon in the early 16th century. The scene depicted in the panel within the painting is that of the deposition, in which Jesus is lowered from the cross. In the foreground is an altar decorated with crosses, in front of which are two large candlesticks with candles and a cross. The resemblance between the two is unmistakable. In each, the large panel in the center is made visible by the angels with tapers who hold the curtains open. The architectural and spatial elements are similar. While these details were copied, Charlotte removed the Christian designs from the front of the altar and replaced them with the scene of the story of Passover noted above, and substituted the Seder plate in place of the chalice used for the Mass. On the title page, the panel painting was replaced with the text of the title written on a burgundy ground. The altar with the white cloth cover, was transformed into a parapet decorated with blue brocade, in front of which Charlotte painted the Rothschild coat of arms and a strand of precious gems. At the bottom of the frame, she made the date of the creation of the Haggadah appear to be carved in wood. This type of trompe-l'oeil, along with the realistically rendered jewels, appears on other pages in the Book of Hours. Oops. Sorry. Even minor details in these works are strikingly similar. Note the circular motif flanked by dolphins in the top corners, as well as the vases and flowers at the bottom of the piers and at the bases. As noted by Oppenheim, Charlotte produced this work at great cost. At a time in which the creation of a manuscript was a rarity in itself, she took up the challenge of painting it herself. In planning it, for many scenes not viewed here, she relied on traditional Jewish sources. For others, she sought out the most beautiful illuminations she could find in Christian works. As a privileged member of the Rothschild family, she lived in both worlds, Christian and Jewish. The result of her life experience is seen combined in this magnificent work. The Brzezinski collection, which previously was seen by only a few, has now become well known by means of the traveling exhibit that is currently here in New York, through the exhibition catalog, and via the online website, brzezinskicollection.com. The individual works are therefore available to study for everyone. As the manuscripts continue to be considered within the context of works of art such as those at the Metropolitan Museum, and using resources such as those in the extraordinary Watson Library here, undoubtedly a much deeper understanding of the making of medieval manuscripts in a Gentile world will come to light. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I thought it was remarkably convincing how you showed this appropriation of images across the world of Western Christian illumination. I wonder if you noticed any cases in which there was a readaptation that changed the meaning of these images, or through which the Hebrew text in these manuscripts used images in different ways than they had been used previously in Christian or non-Jewish manuscripts.
Not in this collection.
Okay. We have time, I think, for a couple of questions people have for Dr. Cohen. Yes.
What was the work that Ms. Rothschild did done in a similar manner to the Book of Hours? In other words, was it done on parchment?
Can you repeat
Yeah.
the question?
The material used to do the painting?
Okay, the question is really an excellent one, and that is, was the manuscript done by Charlotte Rothschild done using the same technique as the manuscript from 1501 to 1504? And both are on parchment. The pigment hasn't been analyzed, but the colors, the type of colors that she's using seem very similar, though hers were from the 19th century and obviously would have some differences. They would have been mixed differently. She could have purchased hers. Certainly she purchased hers, whereas the 1501 manuscript, the artist mixed the pigments by himself. But another very interesting feature is there's a unique element to the Charlotte, or I thought it was a unique element to the Charlotte Rothschild manuscript, and that is that rather than being painted like a true manuscript, where you take a folio, a bifolium, a piece of parchment, and you fold it this way, and the artist of the scribe has to decide where to put his work. But when the artist works on it, she's really working on, or should be working on, two different pages at the same time. This work isn't executed this way. This is done more as a panel painting. Each folio was treated separately, and they all were combined in the manuscript. Now, what's interesting, I just found this manuscript 2 months ago, so I haven't seen the original, but from what I've read, this is a unique feature also in the Bordeaux Book of Hours, that the leaves were separate and then combined. And in fact, she numbers her pages very beautifully at the top. And the Bordeaux Book of Hours also, it's not foliated, it's paginated. And so it was treated as separate pages, which is a very interesting phenomena. So on many different levels, there are remarkable comparisons and similarities between these two works.
Is there one more question? Yes.
When I first saw this manuscript many, many years ago, I asked the owner of it at the time, why would Ansel Rothschild have gotten rid of this manuscript? Why wouldn't he have kept it as a treasured thing, since it came from his granddaughter? The man
His niece.
I meant. The man suggested to me that Ansel Rothschild was a very religious man, and this may have not been in keeping with his...
I don't think that was a problem. Yeah, the question was, why would Ansel Rothschild have gotten rid of something that's this precious and beautiful and done by his niece? This was done in 1842. A year later, he gave to his niece, and actually the husband was a nephew too. Everybody intermarries together here. So he gave them a big plot of land in Frankfurt to be their summer resort. So I don't think he was displeased with this, because it's the next year he's doing that. And if you see pictures of the wedding, there is a wedding portrait, by the way, of Charlotte's marriage. And you know what? You wouldn't even know it was a religious wedding. They were different, and I don't think he would have found that. This work is magnificent. I don't think that it's a casual thing. I don't think he would have had a problem with it, frankly. I think he would have been very touched.
So why do you think it's sold?
I have no idea about when or where it was sold.
Thank you very much.